So good morning, everybody. My name is Lorna Titley. I'm from Quaynote Communications. Welcome to this, the second in Quaynote series of webinars for the super yacht industry. Before I hand you over to our moderator today, Karen Passman, I would just like to introduce her and her panelists. So Karen is the founder of Impact Crew, and she is joined today by Jackie Line, the Director of Business Development at Edmiston. And we also have Marianne Dannison, Head of Yacht Management at Camper & Nicholson's, Fiona Moresso, Senior Charter Broker at Northrop & Johnson, Liz Barr, the Lead Medical Consultant at Red Square Medical, and Captain Janusz Wilinski, the Captain of Motor Yacht Roma. Before I do hand you over to Karen, we do have a question and answer session. So please, if you have any questions, we will answer those towards the end of the session. And if you could put them in the question and answer box rather than the chat session, then we will look at those and we'll try and get through as many of the questions as we can. Apologies if we can't get to yours. Thank you very much, everybody. Over to Karen.
Thank you, Lorna, and thank you to all of you that have tuned in today. Thank you, panelists. We're going to discuss three areas that COVID-19 is affecting our crew. The first area is around their day-to-day lives. We'll also then take a look at what does it mean for the 2020 season ahead. And finally, we'll take a look at crew morale, their well-being, their motivation in these uncertain times. And as Lorna mentioned, yes, please do use the Q&A tab to post your questions, and we will get through as many as we can. COVID-19 has impacted everyone's lives across the globe. And as we start to emerge from various forms of lockdown, it's important that we keep our crew safe and well. Jackie, you also have an HR role to many of the yachts in your fleet, and you regularly speak to your crew. In terms of how safe crew perceive themselves to be, what is the general feeling on board?
I think the general feeling on board our boats in our managed fleet is that crew don't really feel that this is impacting them very much. They're not that anxious about the actual disease. I think they're finding the restrictions more frustrating than anything else. I think they're also wondering. Sorry, something came up on the screen. They're also wondering about when the restrictions are going to ease, but I think in general they're fairly positive. We have had a couple of cases on one of our boats, positive. I have to say that obviously on those boats, the crew are slightly more fearful and certainly slightly more anxious, so which is normal.
Which is absolutely understandable, yeah. Thank you, Jackie. And of course, every country has got its own set of rules which must be complied with. However, in addition, what recommendations, steps and measures are being put in place on board the yachts? Marianne, can you comment on the CNN fleet?
Yes, basically what we've been doing since the beginning of COVID-19 is to advise the entire fleet on weekly basis on the evolution of the virus, the effect it has on crew, on people, and the measures to be taken. So it's been a very evolving situation, because I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, there was this entire story about wearing a mask and then not wearing a mask, and so everything went up and down. We tried to give regular recommendations really in line with the countries where most of our yachts are located, and also not to forget to keep an eye on what each country is also saying. So I hope we're not sending them too much information, but just enough to be able to remain safe and healthy.
Thank you. And I've no doubt that if Medair is looking after your boats, that they are also providing information.
I would say they've been providing a lot of very good information for the boats which are involved with them. But equally, I think every medical supplier has a role to play to make sure people don't take hasty decisions in terms of equipment and buying things, you know. So always have it checked by a professional for whom it is its job to protect health.
Absolutely, and I think the debate for masks is up in the UK at the moment, so interesting times ahead for us. And Liz, we'll come to you in a moment about the whole concept of testing and kits and so forth, but Janusz, you're on the ground, you're in Palma. What are the actual processes and procedures that you've put in place?
So we have been since 14th of March on the imposed lockdown imposed by our management company. 15 crew on board. We haven't been ashore for 45 days, whatever it is now. And so living together, we don't need really to do any social distancing. There haven't been any cases on board. But what we do is obviously we've got procedures in place for arriving of our food, goods, Amazon delivers, so on. What we do is we let them be dropped on the dock and then transfer them to our garage for 24 hours. And if in case of fresh food, it's all disinfected in place. People are obviously wearing their protection gear. And this is, that's what we do here. Now we're starting to face a little bit of a, getting crew on board and, putting them in isolation and so on. So those are the subjects that we're looking at with the management right now. Thank you.
And I have heard of other yachts whereby they've maybe limited, I understand that your crew don't leave the boat, but where perhaps crew are having to leave the boat and go shopping, they're sort of limiting the number of crew that can leave the boat in order to pick up provisions and so forth, and have quite an interesting procedure of stripping at the gate virtually before they're allowed back on board and their stuff immediately in the wash and so forth. How are the crew managing that? Are they quite happy with the processes that are in place?
Yes, they are. They are quite happy. They basically, we've kind of took all the crew in the process of writing those procedures. So they been on board from the beginning, and they had a bit of a decision making in like a frame was given by the management, but they had a bit of decision making in the procedures, so they feel like that's their own stuff. Yeah, I mean, we are on board and everybody's pretty much happy they have a job, so we're just ticking on. And now there's a bit of a light in the tunnel. It looks like the season is going to happen. So yeah, everybody's good.
And no doubt those procedures are going to start to evolve as you start to emerge from lockdown.
Obviously.
Okay. Obviously, movement of crew is a big issue. We know that the IMO is lobbying governments and flag states in order to deem crew as key workers and to create some freedom of movement between their homes and the vessels. We understand from Blue Marine that it is possible to move crew around, albeit taking a bit longer. Janusz, what about the practicalities that you've experienced of moving crew around?
So we are in Palma. The problem here is that they closed the ports and all the traffic, air traffic and port traffic back on the 19th of March. And it was quite difficult in the beginning, but it seems that after there was a decree issued for commercial shipping crew to be allowed, easy passage and so on. And when we are transferring engineers, officers, and so on, it's quite easy. I haven't done any stewardesses, any crew that could be seen as non-essential to the boat. So I don't know about that yet. But from the experience of our second engineer just coming on board tomorrow, actually, after his isolation, yeah, it was fairly easy. There's just letter of guarantee, explanation where he's going, Siemens book, tickets, and he went from Zagreb to Frankfurt, Barcelona, Palma, sleeping in Frankfurt as well. So everything was pretty much smooth and with no big hassle and problems.
Excellent. So it's a bit more paperwork and taking a little longer, but aside from that, it's happening. Great.
Yep,
I'm sure there are going to be some stories out there where it's not working, and we heard a few of those. But Liz, from your perspective as a medic to keep crew safe, what are the recommendations around the movement of crew back onto vessels? So say they're coming back from a rotation.
So this is a real work in progress, actually. There's a lot of talk around testing kits and their effectiveness for reducing isolation periods and whether we should be considering using them. The general thought out in the medical sort of fraternity is no, the testing kits aren't able to reduce isolation periods. There's many different ways of testing. I don't think I really need to go into all of them here today. But the recommendations that we're working on at the moment is that you continue with the 14-day isolation period. And the medical director of Praxis Medical Group, who are a Canadian-based telemedicine company who work with the superyacht sector, they're actually currently putting together a policy and procedures guideline for onboarding crew, which they will then start to look at for charter guests as well. And this will follow a very medical sort of rigorous screening program, really. So it'll take a look at what isolation actually means, because they have been using it already to really good degrees of success, actually. But one of the issues that they're finding is that the self-isolation isn't being rigorously adhered to by the crew members themselves. So we're going to look at writing a policy and procedure for how self-isolation should look prior to joining a vessel. And then we're going to look at the health screening questionnaire that would go with joining the vessel, along with a contact tracing document. So a very detailed process of where you've been, who you have been in contact during your travel to the vessel. And then we're going to start looking at temperature monitoring. So a rigorous temperature monitoring program, which will take place on every crew member for at least 14 days, twice a day, every day. And we've got some parameters set for when the temperature requires us to self-isolate the crew for rechecking, just in case they have started displaying symptoms. So all that is in a work in progress, but as all of you have alluded to already, we have some major issues with the evolution of this virus and the new information that is coming out on a daily basis about the effectiveness of testing, the effectiveness of treatment, the access to treatment, vaccinations. So there's so much information we're still trying to learn. And unfortunately, until this information is tested and cleared, then the guidelines won't change on the 14-day isolation process. Sorry.
No, that's fine. And I mean, you do an awful lot of work in the merchant sector as well. Are there any differences there?
No, we've got similar issues. I'm working within the fishing industry, the merchant sector, oil and gas, and it's all the same.
Lovely. Thank you, Liz. Lorna, you said that you'd like to run a few polls through these sessions. I just wondered whether now might be a good one for our first one.
Absolutely, yes. I'm going to launch that now, and I'm going to give everyone about 3 minutes to have a look at that and to give their views on us, and then I'll come back maybe in about 3 minutes, Karen, and summarise the results from that, if that's okay.
Brilliant. So the question that Lorna has put up there for the poll is: captains and owners should retain crew for a potential late season. And it's a multiple choice, how strongly or you agree or disagree with that statement. So on that note, Marianne, we'd love to hear your views on that.
You see my head shaking.
So looking at the 2020 season, in your view, what is it going to look like?
Well, I'm extremely hopeful. Hope makes you live longer, I've heard. No, in all seriousness, I strongly agree with this question, obviously, for many reasons. First of all, it's really important that everyone keeps their jobs in those difficult times, and also because our seafarers don't have the same kind of protections as people ashore in some fortunate countries who have those systems in place. That's one thing which I think is quite important to mention, because I don't think everyone realizes when seafarers are being laid off, their protection social security system doesn't allow them to have the same benefits than in some other places. That's having said that, the other important part is also for them to keep the vessel and the ship in shape and maintained. any yacht, if you wanted to keep its value and looking good and being ready to be used, needs to be well maintained. And who does that? The crew. I am a great fan of, and I have an immense respect for the work that all the crew do on board ships, and especially now in those times as well, because of the uncertainty of the future. But for that, I'm very hopeful that we'll have a late season as soon as some, and we are dependent on the aviation, see which kind of planes can go back and forth to join vessels here and there. Even, again, just as an example, I spoke to an owner this morning who owns a yacht and is in Palma, and he's hoping that he's able to cruise around there if the maritime authorities will allow the vessel to be cruising around those islands. So it's not sure about how far people can cruise, but it's opening up, and we are waiting with kind of sort of an emergency to get news from the local authorities of each country as to where the cruising areas will be allowed. And this will come up with a deconfinement of each country. We'll have more and more possibilities. So I see things opening up already. Shipyards starting to work, boats getting ready. So yes, the crew is extremely important to keep them on board and keep the boat ready to go, and hopefully our guests and owners will be able to join.
Thank you, Marianne. Fiona, you're at the coalface. You're speaking to charterers, owners and so forth all of the time. What are clients asking for at the moment? What's the demand?
Get me out of here, is what we're hearing. So this is what gives us hope, is that the clients and owners, charter clients and owners, want to get back onto the boats. They want to get out onto the water. And although we're facing a lot of uncertainty about when the areas are going to open, whether flights can come into the Schengen area from outside, what are we going to do about preserving health concerns and so forth, the fact that there is a will from the owners and the charterers to get back out there, I think, it gives us all something to work towards and gives us optimism. I'm thinking we're going to have a late season. We're going to be perhaps not being able to start until mid-July possibly, but from what I'm hearing, as soon as we can give concrete information on what is possible, then we'll be able to start putting our season together. At the moment, we're in a holding pattern. The other thing that we've seen is that some owners whose yachts are currently on the other side of the pond are thinking, well, if I'm only going to have half a season in the Med, it's actually not worth the expense of sending the boat across. So I think I'll probably just keep it here instead and do Bahamas, New England, something over at that side, which means that we're going to see a change in supply and demand in the Med. So the yachts that are already here, charter yachts, should be getting more inquiries than they might have done had the rest of the American-based fleet come across. So we're going to see some changes, but now I'm quite optimistic that we're going to rescue the end of the season and adapt behaviours. Clients may not be able to go to their favourite restaurant and have all 12 of their guests plus visitors sitting at the same table, but I think all of this has shown us how adaptable we are, hasn't it?
Absolutely. So have you looked at any locations?
We're constantly monitoring everything. Greece looked as if it was going to be the first to come out, but I heard earlier today that there may be a bit of a setback, but we don't know. We honestly don't know. I'm based here in France. The ports and nautical activity has not been released from confinement. So the next phase of deconfinement is at the beginning of June. So first one is May the 11th. They're not releasing ports and nautical activities at that stage, but they're going to review it at the end of May with a view to opening up on the 2nd of June. Not guaranteed, but that's the next opportunity. And at the same time, they're looking at opening restaurants, bars and beaches, always within the same parameters with social distancing and hygiene precautions and all the rest of this. So I think we're going to just have to sit tight and see what happens as far as France is concerned, and keep an eye on what's happening in other areas. So Croatia, for example, I think will probably be opening sooner maybe than France, Italy and Spain. But again, nothing has been announced yet.
Okay, thank you. Janusz, you've got a season coming up. Would you like to share with us your views?
Yes, so basically I got a phone call from my owner, and he said that he is willing to move the charters that we have on board and his trips to wherever it's possible for him to land, or wherever there is a decent way for a yacht to cruise, use a beach club or whatever. So in principle, we planned our season here in Spain, in Ibiza, but if that's not happening, then we'll move wherever it's possible. We are in a good position that we already started the season with MIPIM being cancelled in March. I already had full crew on board, so we don't have to get too many people on. And I'm aiming at being ready for 1st of June to basically go anywhere it takes, charter ready as well. And we're looking here at, for instance, like there is, nothing is certain, as Fiona just said. There's no, no 100%, but what I'm hearing around and what's happening around, it's little notes like Spain has a plan to open around 10th of June for pleasure yachting. Obviously, if everything goes well and there is no spread of the coronavirus or second wave, whatever you want to call it. Turkey is looking at 15th of June to open for all the international plane traffic, airplane traffic, and yachting as well. This is like a little bit more confirmed there. Sardinia, for instance, they just put a project, or Sardinian president put a voiced the project through to that needs to be obviously approved by the central government, that they want to have general aviation, so private jets going to Sardinia in May already. So those are like the little things, everybody's trying to keep an eye on what's happening, and in my eyes, making it possible for the season to happen. So on the other hand, what we're doing is in Ibiza, I'm calling the chiringuitos, the beach clubs, organizing some little separate zones for the guests, same on the beach. So we're busy trying to get everybody a little bit involved and see what happens.
And I guess the beaches won't be quite so crowded.
No, they won't.
Have you considered any processes and procedures for decontamination between charters?
Yes, so we've got, there is a lot of different opinions there. Seems like the ozone treatment might be one of the good ones, but it's nothing is 100%. Nobody will tell you and give you a certificate for 100% from what I've noticed. We'll probably buy a little ozone treatment box to do like day-to-day, disinfect it if needed. And I have still working on an agreement, the local company here, to do between the charters, quick 4 to 6 hour site ozone treatment for whole boat. And after that, let the crew go and clean the whole stuff.
Fantastic. Marianne, how about the onboarding of guests? What have you looked at so far?
Well, basically, we're also working all together about finding solutions for boarding guests and also to keep the crew safe, because I think we're all in the same situation. It's good to meet up, but how do we keep safe from each other, and how do we know that the person across the table is in good health? So I think there is still a lot of work that needs to be done about it. I think Fiona before mentioned some pre-boarding checkings, and I think there is a lot of assessments that will need to be made. But by all means, I think sometimes I hear comments about crew being worried that we put them at risk. no one wants to put anybody at risk. I think everyone wants some form of enjoyment of the boats where it would most likely be one of the safest places to have your holidays this summer. So I'd like to think that if we find better solutions and safer measures to minimize the risk as much as possible, where I would say the risk zero won't happen, but just like the same way when you go and do your own groceries. So I think we're all going to have to learn to live with the virus with a minimum of risk, minimize it, and then see how we are able to still have a season. Because I think for everyone it's important to find back some form of normality. It won't be the same, we'll have to adapt, and the beauty is that we are in an industry where we can always find solutions to make it happen. So I'm quite confident that all together, when there is a will, there is a way.
Thank you. And I think there's sort of been some talk about within that risk assessment, whether it's a private jet that perhaps is being used that could be more closely monitored and sanitized and so forth, and perhaps a commercial jet and so forth. Fiona, I guess one of the questions is going to be, if we were to still be in a position of one has to wait 14 days before going on board, having been in isolation close to a vessel, I'm going to guess that our charter guests and owners aren't going to tolerate that. What are your thoughts in terms of that?
It's not just a question of toleration, it's a question of if it's at all possible. Often our clients are scrambling just to get a week away from their businesses. So to say to them that they can have a week on board if they spend 2 weeks in a hotel somewhere, it's just that isn't going to work. Mm-hmm. So we need to find solutions that are ensure safety and respect for each other, but that are also feasible and logistically possible. So that is one of the questions. I mean, there are some big questions. That's one of them. The other one is whether the clients can actually access the Schengen area this summer. We've had no indication. People are talking about not till September. Well, we'd have to all go off to non-Schengen areas with our boats. Yeah, and she'll have to go over to Turkey or something. But there are solutions for that. But yeah, there are. We need, and I think it's really important that we all continue to talk together, because we all have a view, and I think together we can find a solution. So yeah, keep talking.
Absolutely, and I think there's a common theme coming here. You know, Liz, you were talking about track and trace. Marianne, you were talking about risk assessments, and it's probably going to be a combination of all of those factors. So, Lorna, out of interest,
yes,
how did the poll shape up?
Yeah, well, the poll was fairly definitive in its response. So we were asking whether captains and crew should retain crew for potential late season. And captains and owners, whether they should retain crew for potential late season. And as I say, the answer was quite resounding. 67% agreed with that statement, and a further 30% strongly agreed. And we only had 4% who disagreed. So yeah, 97% of people in total agree or disagree that the crew need to be retained, with a view that the season will pick up later. So that's an interesting result.
Marianne,
very positive.
I was about to say, does that kind of follow with what you're seeing in your business?
Well, I feel like I might have influenced it, because it's rather positive, isn't it?
It certainly is.
No, certainly. I think, yeah, at the end of the season or the later season, we'll see things develop. I've got some clients who are joining a yacht in Greece, are intending to join the yacht in Greece with a private jet, and they hope to get there in June. As soon as we'll see one of those private jets landing somewhere and joining their boats, I think it will give us very good hope for the rest of the season. So, like you just mentioned, if we keep each other informed, it's good to pass on this kind of information, because you will see what is possible and what not.
And I guess there's also a bit of an element of false economy. Let your crew go, and in 3 months' time, try and re-recruit from a different pool of crew whom you're going to have to isolate and so forth. So, and Jackie, has that been similar for your fleet, that you're seeing in the main they're retaining crew?
Yes, in the main they are retaining crew, and it's, I mean, like Marianne, we're also very strongly of the opinion that crew should be retained wherever possible. We have had some owners that have suggested it as a possibility, and when that has happened, we've tried to talk them around. You know, we talk about the costs, the lack of continuity, the lack of history, and the fact that, you know, it's not easy to put together a good team. And I think for the most part, most owners understand that, and most captains understand that. And so, and like Marianne said, you know, there's no real, the cost benefit is very small if you get rid of them and then have to re-recruit, because then you're back in that, you know, and you've lost the continuity and the knowledge.
Absolutely. And I suspect going through this together will have bonded them as a team too. Lorna, we're moving on to crew motivation, crew morale, and so forth. I think you've got another poll for us.
I have indeed, yes. So let me move on to that. And yeah.
Sorry. Threw that one at you.
Yeah, so I'll come back to the next poll. I just need to find it here in our system.
Okay, so
the subject. On. Yeah, sorry, I think I've got the second one. Here we go. So it's excuse me, Karen. Yes, sorry. So this is the second poll, and it's to do with crew morale and mental health. And this is asking if there's enough information available for captains and owners to enable them to deal with mental health issues. And again, it's a multiple choice, and we're asking people if they agree or disagree. So I'm about to launch that, and look forward to everyone's feedback.
So is there enough information available for captains and owners to enable them to deal with mental health issues? Interesting question. So thinking about crew morale, Marianne, you've got crew that are on board boats. How are they coping in this lockdown?
I think I've mentioned this before, but I don't remember where. Basically, crew are already used to self-isolation by the nature of their job. They work and live in the same place. I think it's probably, this whole confinement is probably by far more difficult for people who are land-based and who are used to move around like ants and take their car and go here, go there and do things, as opposed to crew members are used to live in the same place, work in the same place. So it's probably, the camaraderie on board is probably extremely important, and they have to keep themselves quite occupied. So on the occupation times, I'm sure they've got plenty to do, because you can do all the jobs that you normally have to hide from so all the winter jobs and all the tedious things where you take half of the room apart is all doable during confinement time. But I think on the other hand, so the crew morale in that sense should be kind of normal. But the fact that they can't travel and the fact that we are being stopped from our own freedom to move out of the boat and go for a walk or go for a run, that is, I think, probably more difficult for them, because as they used to live in a confined place, having a bit of space to go running is quite nice. So for doing sports, I see it as an issue. And also, they must be missing their families terribly, the ones who are normally going on rotation, because this confinement has stopped a lot of crew movements. And so some people who are supposed to go off are still on board, and vice versa. So I feel for them, I do.
Thank you, Marianne. Jackie, I think you've got a boat in lockdown somewhere.
We have a number of boats in lockdown, but we have one particular boat that's in lockdown in Singapore. They were in Malaysia. They finished a charter in Malaysia and opted to go back to Singapore, thinking it would be a safer place to be during this COVID crisis. When they got to the port in Singapore, they were ordered to stay on board for 3 weeks without even setting foot on the quay. And that has just subsequently been increased by a further 6 weeks. And wow. We're finding a huge level of frustration. As Marianne says, you know, it's the ones with families who are on rotation, they can't see the kids. So what we're trying to do with them is, and with a lot of our boats now, is we're doing lots more meetings on Zoom, thank goodness for Zoom, and we're doing meetings not just with the captains, but also with the heads of departments. So it gives them an opportunity to discuss their concerns. We can see if there's anything we can do to help them in the situation. But I think also it provides reassurance, and this is a very uncertain time. And you know, if you're stuck on a boat and you're not able to even get off, I think Marianne's absolutely right. You know, if you can't even go for a run, it's good to have a friendly voice at the other end of a camera or a telephone, and just some reassurance that they're not in this alone, and that we are actually thinking of them, even if we can't be with them at this stage. And I think that's very important for our crew. The fact that actually the management company and the team that's looking after them is you know, in position and able to help if at all possible.
Thank you, Jackie. We were losing you a little bit, but just to pull the bones out of that, what you're doing is having far more meetings with them from management. I know you take on that HR role, but not just with the captains, but with the head of departments as well. So the level of communications has significantly ramped up in order to, and it's a two-way conversation.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
That's right.
Thank you. Janusz, I think you've mentioned that you've been increasing the number of meetings that you've been doing.
Yes, so I was just thinking about it. I think I could estimate I spend about 20% of my time on actually crew morale, so to say, or their well-being. First of all, we've increased heads of department meetings to twice a week. We talk about all the little problems that occur, and then we bring it on the same day on the general crew meeting. Sometimes it's not really looking for troubles, but giving a little bit of a just loosen up the atmosphere a little bit. So we had things like on the crew meeting, we asked everybody for their success story. A success story was, you know, something that they couldn't do for a long time, but now they had time to achieve, whether it would be painting an engine, or, you know, fixing something, or you know, girls getting the toiletries sorted out, whatever it was, success story. The other thing was we introduced as a gratitude story. So a crew member is thankful to another one for helping them doing something. And this just kind of like breaks the monotony of the meeting and gives it a little bit of a, everybody laughs around and it's fine. With noticing, so key for me is that the crew is informed. So they, obviously in the beginning, there was problems a little bit about the job security, whether, you know, we had, like I said, we had 80% crew on board, whether, you know, what's gonna be the management or owner decision about this whole thing. So there was a little bit of uncertainty, job security issues, and they were informed. You know, I did inform them from the beginning what are the scenarios, what is possible that will happen. We did some calculations whether it would be valuable for the owner to, you know, to do 50% crew or not, and rehiring them back, and that pretty much came to zero at the end. So that gave me a bit of assurance that we will keep the crew. You know, very thankful to the owner that he's keeping us on board. And on one of the meetings, one of the deckhands actually said, you know, like just the fact that, you know, we're telling them what is to be done, how is the season going to look, if it's there, what is the plan, that makes them already feel better. So that's another thing.
Fantastic. And have you been increasing the amount of training perhaps? Have you had more time for that?
As we're going now with those meetings twice a week now, a part of the Thursday meetings is a training. So we do that. Basically, any subject is to be taken either between departments, or we just teach everybody to do some notes, or you know, I'm pretty much open to whatever crew wants to train in.
And I have no doubt you have been found unique ways to celebrate birthdays and success stories.
Okay. Yeah, birthday, actually we did a casino night on one of the birthdays. So we set up roulette, like we've got all this theme parties and so on. So we got everybody dressed in 1920s, and we had a little casino night with roulette and blackjack set up on the boat. Obviously no money involved, but it was quite funny. The karaoke night, a couple other Hawaiian nights, just usually it happens around on Saturday nights.
It's good practice for the crew, isn't it? For when they've got the guests on board and need to set it up for real. So fantastic and good fun. From my point of view, leadership is absolutely key at this time to manage crew morale. You've identified communications is absolutely vital. And if you think you've communicated enough, you probably haven't. There is an expression out there, if you haven't heard a rumour by 10 a.m. in the morning, start one. And that we often see. So yes, we need to see that really strong leadership, but perhaps equally as important, and it was lovely to hear you mention this, Janusz, is that you involve your crew in the decision making as well. So it's not just about strong leadership and giving out the orders, it's actually helping them to feel that they are properly listened to and engaged and involved in those decisions. It increases their buy-in. And I think by taking the time out, Jackie, as you do, to hear their perceptions, because that is their reality. And with that ear to the ground, you can start picking up some of those early signals, particularly for crew on board, picking up on the early signals of what we would call bad stress. And I know, Liz, what are your recommendations to crew and so forth in terms of managing that?
Oh, golly. This I could go on about for ages, so I will keep it brief, I promise.
In 2 minutes.
Just in my experience, I'm from a military background, so I'm very used to the unknown and the long periods where you don't know where you're going and what you're seeing. Key to good mental health and managing stress is good physical health. So I would suggest that people need to sleep properly, they need to eat well, they need to exercise regularly, and that gives you a good basis for avoiding the stress. But obviously, living in the close quarters with the lack of knowledge about when, where and what might happen with COVID-19 can start to wear on people. So really what we're looking for is for any changes in behaviour, little changes in behaviour from the norm for that person. And we would encourage people to speak up and start those conversations.
Fantastic. And I think there's something about, there is so much information out there regarding COVID-19. You can just get overwhelmed and swamped by it. And there's a lot of miscommunication as well around it. So perhaps limiting how much time people spend absorbing it could be quite useful too.
Well, there's just a vast amount of speculative information, and we're seeing that a lot, certainly from my perspective in the medical world. We're seeing that a lot with the testing kits. And it's people are looking for answers and solutions that we just haven't got at the moment. And that's hard, because what everybody collectively has said is that knowledge is power, and the fact that these people have got this knowledge and they're sharing it with each other and they're passing it down the stream is excellent. But when we haven't got reliable knowledge to pass on, a bit like what you said, Karen, is the rumour mill starts turning, and the stories that come back through, you're sort of going, oh my God, where has that even come from? That's not even medically possible. But on the stress side of things, access to help and things like that, there's vast amounts of resources for people if they're feeling stressed at work, if they don't feel confident to speak up on board, there's other places they can go to get support. So I think it's important that people don't wait for it to get to a really bad stage and actually seek out help at an early point to avoid anything worse from happening.
Just before you go and share with us some of those locations, Liz, Lorna, what were the results of that last poll?
Yeah, again, the results were quite interesting, not as stark as the earlier poll, but we were asking, just to remind people, is there enough information available for captains and owners to enable them to deal with mental health issues? And the biggest contingent of people, 48%, disagreed with that. They felt there wasn't enough information available for captains and crews to help them deal with mental health issues. However, we had 36% who agreed and 8% who strongly agreed, and we had 8% who strongly disagreed. So on balance, you're getting you're getting sort of 56% who don't think there's enough information, and the balance who think there is, to varying degrees. So again, that's a more varied and telling result.
And I think that's actually really, in some respects, pleasing to hear. I don't know if you'll agree with me here, Liz. You know, certainly you and I for the past year have been trying to support the industry to get some more information out there. Would you please share with us some of the findings and the places that people can go to for that information?
Yes, certainly, of course. Just very briefly on that though, I'd be super interested to know what the breakdown of that poll was, because the amount of information that is accessible is unbelievable. So it'd be interesting to know if there's a breakdown in how the information is being disseminated to different sectors within, you know, different sort of parts of the industry itself. So on that note, one of the main sources of information that I particularly recommend to a lot of super yacht crews that I work with is the iSwan network. Now they're a charity that sort of work on welfare and looking after the seafarer at all levels. I'm going to drop a link into the chat for you to have a look at, but what they have got is an absolutely amazing collection of information on COVID-19 related issues right across the maritime sector. But they also have a really good section where they can link to all the support networks that are available in a way of 24/7 helplines. There's online brochures and documentation that you can read through, all relating to stress and mental health, specifically in seafarers. So I think it's a really good resource for finding what you need. So I'll drop that into the chat now for you.
Brilliant. I think the other thing to make you all aware of is that iSwan are looking to set up a single portal that is exclusively for super yacht crew. It's called yachtcrewhelp.org. I don't know, Liz, if you pop that one in, or shall I do that?
No, I've got the Just Giving page for that one. Is that the one?
So if we advertise it through the yachtcrewhelp.org, this is a site that they're focusing on to provide exclusively for super yacht crew. And if we can raise enough funds for them, that will be a single access portal for all super yacht crew. So hopefully it will make it much easier. There's one place to go, and there you can find the rest of the information. Lorna, I'm very conscious that there's been a bit of chit chat going on.
Yes.
So have you been able to pull together some of the questions?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I've tried to group together some of the questions because there are a couple of themes, Karen, as you might expect. I know some people have put questions as well in the chat section. So if you do want your question answered, if you can just put it in the Q&A session and we'll try and get to that as well, but no promises. So Karen, a couple of questions here that I'm going to try and roll into one. Dominic Bulfin from Bargate Murray has said that they work closely with managers of clients' yachts, particularly in crew matters. They've even had a yacht stuck in Italy since February, and they had very few issues with crew. Owners have been able to keep their crew employed. However, he says, we are seeing the start of some crew members refusing to return to duty, even though the yachts are maintaining extremely high safety and hygiene measures. Are those involved in crew management on the panel seeing similar traits? And then I did also have another question. This was, they haven't named themselves, but someone else has asked, how can we safeguard the crew from infected charter guests? So kind of two questions in one there, Karen.
So just to clarify, so the crew that are refusing to work, is that they're refusing to take guests, or they're refusing to do their normal duties, or they're refusing to come back to the yacht?
Well, Dominic, he may be able to specify here, but in his message he said that they are seeing some crew members refusing to turn to duty, even though the yachts are maintaining extremely high safety and hygiene measures. So it kind of implies that they don't want to be on the yacht at all. Oh, actually, it's just clarified here. So Dominic has just said, hi all, just to clarify, the question was regarding off-duty crew returning to work. Yeah.
So Marianne, have you experienced that?
Well, we've had a few who at the beginning of the confinement and at the beginning of, I would say, our global knowledge of the virus were very concerned about rejoining the yacht. And then that was still just pretty much on the edge when there were still flights going and people were still moving around. And then when pretty much all the flights were kind of stopped, well, the person who was anxious about coming back to the boat couldn't come back to the boat anyway. So that problem was kind of solved itself. But I do understand the concern of some seafarers being worried about going back to the vessel. And the same way, I would say, generally, a lot of people will be anxious about even getting out of their house very soon. That's a problem of being, because in confinement we feel rather safe with the people we're with, and it's the same for crew members. So rejoining a yacht, I've had only 1 or 2 cases like that, and it solved itself. So I can't really comment on that. I've got another issue. I've got one who wants to come back to the boat, is ready to drive across entire Europe to go back on duty, and I have to slow him down. So you have a lot of cases.
So I suspect some people are more risk adverse than others. That's human nature. Jackie, have you got something to add there?
We had a similar situation to Marianne. What we did, we've had a boat that's been in lockdown in Italy in the shipyard as well. Very safe boat. And what we did was we sent a number of the junior crew not on a furlough per se. They were kept on full pay, but we sent them home, and we kept the safe manning going for the shipyard period. But yes, we have had a few that have been at home and have refused to come back. But as you said yourself, Marianne, it solved itself because they can't actually come back on board, so they can't get to the boat. The ones that are coming back now that the situation is eased somewhat in Italy are going to be put into an apartment to self-isolate before they actually get back on board.
Thank you. Liz, would you like to have a stab at the question of guests?
The guest one, is that the how can we safeguard the crew from charter guests that might possibly be infected? Are we putting too much pressure on authorities to get the season going and putting income over health? It's tempting to say yes, that it feels a bit like that. Not so much. I don't feel that the pressure is coming from the vessels. As far as safeguarding the crew from charter guests that might possibly be infected, that's huge. I mean, we're working at the moment on the processes and procedures for onboarding crew. If that works, and it will be a work and an evolving work, then we can look at ways of bringing on charter guests. But I don't think there is a way that we can guarantee any kind of prevention of them bringing an infection on board. I think it's a risk situation that we have to look at case by case. We have to use some clear contact tracing, some clear health screening. There could be a case for monitoring on board. It's a difficult question. I wish I could give you a straight answer, but it is something that we're working really hard on to try and come up with a workable solution. Sorry.
And I suspect that there's this continual search for new testing mechanisms that will support that process as well.
The race is on, like you wouldn't believe. I must get a new document sent through to me every single day. What about this kit? What about this kit? And actually, on the testing kit note, I think it's probably worth just mentioning here. The various testing procedures that are available, whether they're recommended by governments, whether they're swabs, whether they're blood tests, they are not all 100% reliable, and we're getting a lot of false negatives. Even with the swabs, we're getting a lot of false negatives. And what we don't want to do is say to people, yes, we'll use these tests to bring people back on board, when we haven't got one that's robust enough to tell us whether or not there's enough viral load to say, yes, the person's got it and they're carrying it, even if they're asymptomatic, or no, they definitely haven't got it. So until we get that absolute golden egg of test kits, we're looking at the test kits as very much a you've got the symptoms, well, we'll test you, and that'll just tell us yes or no if it's COVID-19, if there's enough viral load, rather than a diagnostic test that is going to allow us to get people back on board quicker or to bring guests on any quicker.
Thank you. Lorna, were there some more questions?
Yes, I mean, there's a lot of questions, and again, I'm trying to sort of put them together. There seem to be themes. People are asking about different countries and different jurisdictions, and they're also asking about having more, where they can find more information about specific cases. So, for instance, somebody here, they haven't given their name, has asked which countries are charterers more willing to visit this season. Someone has said, does anyone know of the countries which have already created epidemiological measures for yachting business, yachts arriving, leaving the countries, guests embarking, disembarking, and so on? And they've mentioned here, this is Maya Ban from Croatia. She's mentioned that Croatia is already working on this, and officials are asking for suggestions from yachting businesses.
I suppose Fiona would be best placed to answer what the charterers are looking for.
Well, there aren't any particular countries that clients are asking for. I think that they want to know where they can go. I think that the question's turned around more than we've ever seen before. I haven't heard of any jurisdictions where they have answers to the questions of how do we get people on board safely. Interested to hear what Maya's saying about Croatia. That's a good initiative. But I would imagine, given what Liz has just said, it's, you know, everybody's in the same position, struggling and to find a test that's reliable and gives us the answers that we actually need to have. So yeah,
in fact, we don't have any answers yet.
No, and I think that's the thing we need to bear in mind. This is, if it's new, it's evolving, and we're seeing day by day changes. I think at one point, Marianne, you and I were talking, and it was every 7 days we're reviewing the situation, as well as on a daily basis. Lorna, was there sorry, Marianne.
I was wanted to comment on Liz, who definitely, I think I'm really very happy she mentioned that actually nothing is reliable and people have to be extremely cautious not to jump into it and start using tests or coming and saying, oh, I'm only going to take negative people on board this summer. I mean, how can you be sure of that? So yes, we'll have to learn to live with it, but I'm not sure that we will have any reliable tests before the season, and that's where there is another problem. Because this virus has been going on for a little while now, and it will take still probably another long time before we have reliable tests, even though everyone is working on it like mad. But I think we've all noticed all the answers we want to have since about 4 months, we don't get them. So we're still in this uncertain cloud. Given that, I think we'll have to take the best measures we can to minimize, again, the risk and find solutions which are workable and acceptable for each person to live with.
Thank you. Lorna.
Yeah, actually, somebody following on from that that comment there from Marianne, somebody has actually said, sorry, but until such time that there is a vaccine, there's no guarantee that anyone, guests or crew, can get infected whilst on board. It's very, very grey, as then you're looking at locking charter guests on board for perhaps 2 weeks. And who will pay for this, they say. So Diane Franklin has asked a question about referencing the Balearics. As she says, the Balearics may well be opened up for cruising, but international flight travel is going to be unlikely for a long time. How many owners live in countries where their yachts are moored and therefore don't need to fly in? So yeah, she's kind of making the point there about where people are located vis-a-vis their yachts. So yeah, I don't know if anyone has got any comments about that at all, Karen.
Hopes are up again with private jets because a lot of people are using them.
And I think that sort of ties in with this question around the air conditioning. That I noticed that somebody was asking about transmission through the air conditioning unit. Liz, have you got any views on that? Hang on, you're on mute.
I'll try and unmute. Oh yes, she's unmuted now.
Sorry about that. The problem with the virus is we're still learning about how long it can actually survive outside of the body and on surfaces. So mostly with air conditioning, where it's shared vents with other cabins and compartments on board, it would take too long for it to travel and stay alive for it to be any major issue. But one of the things that we're recommending that I think Captain Janusz was alluding to is these extreme hygiene measures. And actually the cleanliness of the air conditioning vents is one of the really important things. We already do it for things that can travel through there with respiratory outbreaks. And this is essentially a respiratory outbreak. So as long as people are maintaining their good quality air conditioning hygiene and looking after their equipment properly, then there shouldn't be too much of a risk of it being transmitted through the air conditioning. But again, it's still, there's still no clear data on that. So this is just what we're learning at the moment.
Thanks, Liz. Lorna, I'm conscious of time.
Yes.
I noticed there was a question there regarding insurance. I think
Yes.
you and I spoke that perhaps that might be the topic of another webinar for you.
Yes, I mean, we've got 2 or 3 people that have asked about insurance. If anyone has got any knowledge of insurance claims or the availability of insurance for COVID-19, as somebody has asked, then it may be something we can cover briefly, but I think it's probably a whole topic in its own right.
I suspect the whole legal perspective, you know, what if a crew member gets infected as a result of an individual coming on board, a charterer, perhaps, I suspect that probably is quite a lengthy, deep debate.
Yes, and actually we've got Richard Philippes here, has said that P&I of Quality will have cover for dangerous viruses. He can answer that. So that might be something that anybody that needs to have that information can follow up with Richard separately if they wish.
Fabulous. So
Yeah.
I suspect on that note, panelists, thank you very much for your time. Audience, thank you all so much for tuning in and for your participation. And Lorna and Alison, of course, for hosting. And I suppose we ought to ensure that we raise a glass this evening for Captain Tom, or is he Colonel now?
He's Colonel now, I think.
Colonel
yes,
now.
indeed.
30 million, amazing.
Well, thank you very much, Karen. Thank you, everybody. We've had about 75 people have been tuned in today, so thank you very much. We will send out the video recording afterwards for anybody that's not seen this or wants to have this for the record. And if you have any more information, want any more information or have any questions for us, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Thank you again, Karen, and all our panelists today.
A pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.